Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, we proudly bring to you Mormonism Live!
Shut up and sit down.
Good evening, everyone. How are you doing? And how are you doing, Mr. Real?
Mr. Real. How are you doing, Arca?
I'm doing great. We're just playing for time here to see if the very famous and very much in demand Maven will be joining us tonight. It looks like she's been trying to join us recently. I know that she had a packed day over at the Mormon Stories studio, or should I say the studio that shall not be named, where she has responsibilities there. And they've been going over the history of child sex abuse cover-up in the LDS Church. I don't know how they could possibly get done with that in one day.
Isn't it strange? It's a strange thing that you and I belonged at one time. Well, you still do. We belong to the true and living Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the only true and living church upon the earth with that the Lord is well pleased. And it takes hours
individually and not collectively.
And it takes hours and hours and hours to cover the sexual abuse that has occurred in the LDS Church.
And that's just the stuff that's leaked out, man.
Right. There's hundreds of millions of dollars paid off to people that we've never heard the stories of.
And we never will. This is the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
It's a really short tip, and it's getting a lot of traction recently.
Yeah, you would think Jesus Christ, his church, his holy church upon the earth, wouldn't have a big problem. But outside of maybe the Catholic Church, I think the LDS Church has paid out more in hush money than any other entity, religious entity in the United States anyway.
Oh, that's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
I don't know what you have to back that up with, but it sounds plausible.
Well, I'm telling you, they paid out I think the Boy Scouts had to pay out so much money. The Methodist Church had to pay out, and the LDS Church was like in between Methodism and the Scouts themselves with the large payout. It's crazy that these guys would rather pay out millions of dollars of their money than just change some policies and be healthier.
I know. Talk about dying on a hill that other people are dying on.
I don't get it.
With other
I thought these
money.
guys cared about money too. Like money was important. It seems like maybe abuse is more important.
It came to me just this morning when I was thinking about this strange discrepancy the LDS Church seems to have, which we've talked about before, in which this case illustrates that anytime there is a conflict between the church interests as an institution and the interests of the members of the church as people, anytime there's a conflict there, the church is going to go with the interests of the church every single time. I've never seen a situation where that was not the case.
Yeah.
And the thought that occurred to me earlier this week was the difference between the way the church feels about its members versus the way it feels about its members' money. And I think there's a big difference in the way the church feels about those two issues. And the thought came to me about the story in the New Testament of the widow's mite, which I'm sure you've heard of, the parable of the widow's mite or the story of the widow's mite. It struck me that the church cares a lot more about the widow's mite than it does about the widow.
Yeah. And the next generation of widow mite payers, it wants to make sure it holds on to those.
Oh, absolutely. Those are very, very important. And I think that everything the church does can pretty much be seen through that lens, and it makes more sense that way. I'm not saying it's moral. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not sure it's what Jesus would do, but I think it makes sense that that's what they're doing and why they're doing it. Well, we've got a great guest on for tonight's show.
He's just FYI, I do have the slideshow on my end, so we're good.
Thank you very much, because we do have a number of photographs here from our guest, who is a sergeant in the United States Air Force. The title of tonight's show is LDS Force, mainly because he's in the Air Force, and I thought that was an interesting play on words, especially when we hear from our guest about the stories of the force that the LDS Church put on him as a young man, and even as a not so young man, and the deleterious effects that had upon our guest's life. I think we're approaching the cusp of a happy ending to this story. But at any rate, are you ready to bring on our guest, Bill, or did you have anything else you wanted to say?
No. I will make a quick mention. We put a bunch of content up on the YouTube channel today, the entire series of the Cognitive Dissonance podcast. But I've also been doing this cool thing with this book, Obscure Mormon Doctrine, and people are really digging these as well. So, folks, Mormonism Live is the #1 show on this channel, but there is tons of great content. Yeah, we should play the applause again.
Thank you. I can do the applause quicker than you hit the button.
Yeah. But there's lots of good stuff and lots of cool things are happening. And I think we're really doing well with Mormonism Live leading the way. So, but anyway, folks, check out the YouTube channel and drop us a donation and help us keep this thing going.
Please do if you can. And we're going to bring on an individual tonight who's been through an awful lot. His name is Adam Hussey, Huzzey. He is a sergeant with the Air Force. And if we could bring him on, we'll ask him a few questions, give him a chance to tell his story. Good evening, Sergeant Hussey. How are you doing?
Good evening. It's nice to be here. Thank you for this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. We have the name Adam up there under your name. That is your correct name, but is that okay to call you Adam, or would you prefer Sergeant?
Oh no, I prefer Adam. As I tell all my subordinates and my troops underneath me, you can call me whatever you want, just as long as it's not lazy or SOB.
Okay, very good. All your subordinates that you have. How many subordinates do you have, Adam?
Right now, I probably have about 250 assigned to me.
Wow. And is this in the capacity of your being a teacher for the Air Force?
Yes, sir.
First off, what is your rank?
Technical sergeant.
I won't ask for your serial number. I don't know if you can give that to me. Can you give that to me?
No, probably not. Well,
I thought that was one of the 3 things you could give.
Thanks to the OPM leak, I probably could give it to you. And the OPM leak, the Russians and the Chinese already have it anyway. So, it is what it is. I just I don't have it memorized. I've only been in for 10 years. Don't get too upset.
How long is your serial number?
It is 9 digits. It's it kind of mimics the Social Security number.
Yeah.
But it's now called DOD ID number.
Okay. How long have you been with the Air Force, and what does you do currently?
10 years last week. I am a linguist with the United States Air Force. And so my primary responsibility is to translate stuff in the Russian language. And right now I teach Russian. So it's, as you can imagine with the world situation, it's very important to have plenty of soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines who understand the language.
Yes, absolutely. Now, are you okay saying where you're stationed?
So I'd rather not for now.
Okay.
But as I get into my story and kind of express my opinions and beliefs, I just want to make it kind of clear that these are my opinions and not the policies or thoughts or procedures of the United States Air Force by any means. I'm just one of many cogs in a giant machine.
I understand. I'm glad you said that up front. As far as Mr. Reel and I, we also do not speak for the policies, procedures of the LDS Church. If we did, they wouldn't be covering up child sex abuse.
That's a very good point. And like the book that Bill was holding up earlier, The Obscure Mormon Doctrine, yesterday that was called The Main Doctrine of the Church.
This was the dominant narrative right here.
Yeah, exactly.
This is what Richard Bushman says is no longer true.
Which, 20, 30 years ago, it was the living, breathing from the pulpit, bearing testimony about doctrine right there.
Yeah. That's why you have to get rid of past prophets, because they don't say things we like in the modern times.
Oh, yes. Well, and, unfortunately, their writings and their musings have a tendency to stick around now and become more available through technology, which is kind of a big part of my story, a real big part of my story.
We're going to start with your story.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
If we haven't already.
Yeah, no, let's do it.
But yours is a traumatic story. And unfortunately, the way I view it, it comes under the heading of members who took their religion too seriously. Or I'll just take out the two and I'll just put, they took their religion seriously and it ended up having bad consequences for them.
Exactly. Exactly.
So let's go back to when you were 8. By the way, how old are you now?
I'm 37 years old.
Okay, so 8 is 31 years ago? No, 29 years ago.
I'll take your word for it. I'm not a mathematician. I'm just paid to translate stuff.
I think I just proved I'm not a mathematician either. That's why I went into the law, because I suck at math. But it's about 3 decades ago. You're 8 years old. You're going to get baptized. You understand, because you're being told that being baptized means you're going to serve a mission.
Yes.
You're going to be doing everything the church asks you to do forever throughout the course of your life, whatever it may be.
Yes, sir.
And you're not just doing this to make mom and dad happy, although I'm sure that's one of the reasons, but you take this commitment very seriously as a young man. Is that right?
Deadly seriously. I did not, I have when I was 35 years old, I was diagnosed with scrupulosity in 2020. So that will help contextualize my story. However, the mental health diagnoses of scrupulosity doesn't really come into acceptance into play until about when I'm in my 30s. So, it's nice having a name for something that's always existed. But just because we now have a name for it doesn't mean that it didn't exist in the past. We just have a name for it now, something that we can define it by.
So you're 8 years old, and I understand that part of this show is going to be looking back on your life with what you know now. And the other part is going to be reliving your life or telling that story without knowing what it was, because you're in the dark a bit as you're going through it, but you're not as much anymore. But it sounds like an 8-year-old who really wants to take his baptismal covenant seriously and be obedient to God and make God proud of him and do what is right is something that should be encouraged. What could possibly be wrong with that?
Exactly. If I could get the first slide put up, it's the family photo. This will help contextualize what we're talking about. So this is my family. My brother and I, we look pretty similar. We look just like dad. Mom and sister there. I love my family. They're the reason why I'm here today. They're the sole reason why I get up in the morning. I'm so grateful for everything that they've done for me. And when I was 8 years old, having the mindset that I have, having been diagnosed with scrupulosity, and now understanding that, I can look back at my life and understand what's happened to me at almost every different stage that's defined by pretty serious events in my life. So if we could go to picture number 1.
By the way, I'm guessing that's your mom, dad, brother, and sister in that picture on the couch.
Yes, exactly. So that's my older brother, Ben, my dad, Kent, my mom, Annette, and my sister, Sarah. We all are about 2 to 3 years apart from each other. I'm best friends with my brother now. My sister and I have always been close, though we were probably really too close in age. So when we were teenagers, we were always fighting and whatnot. But now, we're as thick as thieves. We're very close to each other.
Great. Well, I hope some of them are watching you right now.
Well, they might be. I'm still building up the courage to send it to them and to share it with them. But I think they would be proud of me nonetheless. I really do.
Well, let's go back to when you're 8 and 10. You're still very young. You're still wanting to do everything that you're supposed to do, but you run into some roadblocks early on.
Yes, sir. All right. So when I about 8 years old, so I get baptized when I'm 8 years old. And at this point, I'm taking things very seriously. I don't know how to dissociate from what I'm told is true and what is factual and what is experiential at this age. So I'm very much taking the covenants of baptism seriously. And so by the night that I'm baptized, I'm already starting to worry about committing sin.
Now, that's because you were told, probably like most young children are, as part of preparation for baptism, that, up until you're 8, this is all on Jesus. But after you get baptized, now it's on you, kid.
Yes, it's on you. And you've got to you've got to repent. And the problem that I've always struggled with from that age is understanding when my repentance was good enough, how I can tell that it was accepted, because you get these good feelings, right? You be like, oh, okay, I prayed. And so I get the elevation emotion and I think, okay, well, I've been forgiven. But then you make the same mistake again. And then you realize, oh, wait, so is it going to be twice as hard to repent this time? Or does God doubt my sincerity? So I'm starting to view these types of scenarios already at the age of 8. If we could go to picture number 3. So that's my mom and I at Disney World having a great time. Absolutely lovely woman. If anybody in the audience knows my parents, they can definitely attest that great family. Next photo, please. Yeah, so this is me. I'm about 10 to 12 years old. I'm in middle school in this picture. And the reason why I picked this picture is because this was a defining moment for me.
Yeah.
A super defining moment for me. We lived in Iowa at the time, and we had just moved into the area. And I had started in a new middle school, very impressionable kid, wanted to make a good impression. And I've always been a pretty, I guess you could say, like, if you could assign a gender to characteristics like effeminate or like easygoing, I didn't like sports. I didn't like being aggressive. I didn't like fighting. And in the 90s, culture was a little bit different. And so people were teasing me and saying that I was gay. Of course, there's nothing wrong with being gay. It's absolutely normal. But as a LDS,
not if you're a Mormon boy who takes it seriously, right?
Yes,
Adam?
exactly. Not if you're an LDS boy who takes it seriously. As a 10-year-old, as a 11, 12-year-old, especially. So I've made these covenants, and I know that the objective of life is to get married in the temple, is to have a family, and to not mess that up, so I can have my family for eternity. Don't be the loose knot in the rope. Don't be the broken link in the chain. Don't mess that up, because if you break the chain, then everybody underneath you, like your children, are going to be disconnected from your parents and your siblings. So everything is riding on you. Everything is riding on you.
That's a lot of thought, hadn't you?
Oh yeah, I was exceptionally acute to religion and spirituality from the get-go. So as this 10-year-old, I was being teased in middle school about being gay. And so to prove that I wasn't gay, I was talking to one of my friends, and he said, "Hey, I got an idea. Why don't you come spend the night at my house? And my dad's got some magazines. We can look at these magazines. And if you get a reaction, AKA if you have an erection, then to the pictures of women in a Hustler magazine or a Playboy magazine, then then you're obviously not gay." And 12-year-old logic, this makes or 10-year-old logic, this makes perfect sense.
Well, 62-year-old logic, it makes sense to me too.
Exactly. So before I go any further, I'm going to throw out a few trigger warnings.
What a good friend is all I can say.
Exactly. So there's going to be some discussion about eventually about sexual assault and self-harm in my story. So if that kind of stuff is too heavy for you or triggering, please know that it will come up in my story. But so I go over to my friend's house to spend the night, and he pulls out
the experiment.
And do the experiment.
Don't forget the experiment.
Yes, and I passed the experiment. So I proved to myself and my friend that I wasn't gay.
I'm going to resist the temptation of asking for details.
Yeah. So needless to say, when in no details aren't necessary. I proved that the experiment worked.
Okay, so you're not gay. The good news is you're not gay.
Yeah, mission success. mission successful, right?
And I mean that within a Mormon paradigm. I think everybody understands what I mean when I say the good news is you're not gay.
Yes, same here. Strictly through the lens of LDS philosophy in the 90s, which was, again, defined by the brethren as being a sin, an abnormality. And so you were born that way as like a punishment kind of thing, for behavior in the pre-existence. Same thing with, dark skin or deformities, how those birth effects and stuff like that were originally defined by the church as being punishments for decisions made in the pre-existence. Now, and then they switch to become like, oh, well, you are an exceptional spirit. That's why you were born with mental retardation and things like that. So they changed the definition in the field goal the entire time. So in the 90s, in my paradigm, I'm thinking, okay, man, okay, so I proved that I'm not gay, but I created a problem for myself.
What's the problem that you created?
The problem that I created for myself is now I've seen pornography. I've masturbated, and both of which are a sin. Both of which are a sin, and you hear about it in priesthood meeting, especially back then. Every priesthood meeting, every general conference, the speech, the talks to the youth, terrified me going to general conference as a young man, because all they ever talked about was how dirty and how worthless we were. They'd be like, oh, you're so chosen, you're so elect, so don't mess it up. And the whole time I'm thinking, I already did. I already messed it up. And because I opened that door, we didn't have the internet at the time. So like the Sears catalog with, the bra ads and stuff like that, I would look at that, and I hid one in my room, and I was like, gosh dang, this is like, I'm terrible.
Language.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'm completely cut off from God. And then I would try to repent. I would pray. I remember as a teenager, spending hours on my bedside at night, begging God to forgive me and hoping that he would, and waiting for that conviction, that feeling from the Holy Ghost that I had been forgiven. And sometimes I would feel like I had been. But then I would also feel that feeling when I was at church on Sunday, singing the hymns. And then I also realized that I also recognized I felt that same feeling anytime I was around my family. And then I realized I also felt that same feeling, like when I go to a great movie or to Disney World. And so I kept thinking, well, how is it? So this feeling that I'm having of closeness to my family or excitement at Disney World, it must not be, the Holy Ghost. So I must not have been forgiven.
And it must not be the Holy Ghost because the Holy Ghost would not be with you while you're doing the things you're doing?
Exactly. Every time I fall off the horse, I become further withdrawn from God. I have very, very few memories of my teenage years. Very few memories of my teenage years. Pictures are the only things that I have that help me remember my teenage years, because I remember how obsessed I was with getting right with God, and hiding the knowledge that I was doing these things from my family because I did not want to disappoint them.
Right.
Because
when
I
you're
didn't
telling
want
me the
to be
story.
the person.
Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me.
Oh,
When you're telling me the story, by the way, can we get rid of this picture here for a few minutes and we'll talk a little bit more? Thank you very much. I think Maven did that, or Bill, I'm not sure, but whoever did that, thank you. Adam, when we were talking about this story, I was saying, it seems like you think you're gay, you're worried you're gay because that is anathema in the Mormon church.
Yes.
And then your friend does you a solid, who figures out an experiment, proves to you that you're not gay, you're actually normal. And I'm putting that within the air quotes, the church approved air quotes of being normal. And now you're fine, except that now you're in trouble because you're normal.
Yes, exactly.
You're attracted to women at an age appropriate time, I would think, at least if you're going to compare it to me or other guys I know. But, there's a natural interest in the female shape for people who are attracted to women, and you have that. But now that becomes its own problem for you.
Yes, exactly. And the point that becomes a problem is because at this point, at my age, I'd been reading the Bible, reading the Book of Mormon, and I specifically remember reading the Sermon on the Mount, and where it talks about the Lord. I'm going to kind of paraphrase.
Is this looking after a woman to lust after in your heart?
Looking after a woman is lusting after your heart. Yes, and it's the same as committing adultery.
Yep,
it's
exactly.
the same as committing adultery. And so here's me, this hormonal teenager, and I'm just filthy and depraved, because even at church, I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh, she's cute. Oh, she's good looking. Sister so-and-so, boy, yeah, I'm really attracted to her. And so I sit there and I'm thinking, stop it. You are so sinful. You are so awful. And the only messages that we're ever hearing is that, oh, Christ forgives you. Absolutely. But you have to do your part. And I keep thinking everybody else is having this spiritual experience that confirms to them beyond a shadow of a doubt, because they say it. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the truest church, the living and true church on the earth. Everyone says it, and that's fine. That's fine. But at the end of the day, you do not know. You believe. You have a sincere conviction. That's fine. That's fine. You can say that. But to say that in the mind of me, a 12, 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old impressionable kid, I thought that meant they actually knew. Like beyond a shadow of a doubt. And so when I hear these people who call themselves special witnesses, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, they've seen Jesus. Jesus has told them these things. I know I am a son of perdition. I was obsessed with trying to figure out what the qualifications were for becoming a son of perdition, because I wanted to know where I was on that threshold. There were so many times. I'm gonna go into my story when I was about 16 years old, and I was a priest, and the this moment was it could have been a make or break point for me, because so I would go months where I was back on the horse, having repented. I would stop masturbation. I wouldn't look at the Sears catalog or anything like that. And then we finally had access to the internet when I was a teenager, and about 16 years old, just got into the priest quorum. And one day I decided I was going to look at just a few pictures on the internet, and I got a little brazen, and I went to print one out, and it was an old inkjet printer. So it's just taking its time printing.
Was it in color?
Oh yeah, and our computer was in the family room.
Oh man, this is dicey.
Yeah, so I'm like, no one's around. I could just shrink the picture a little bit, pop it out, go stick it under the pillow. I'm good to go. And so the printer, the sheet's coming off the printer, and I hear someone coming down the stairs. So I'm like, oh shit. So grab the paper, crumple it up, and I throw it away in the trash can underneath a whole bunch of other stuff. Cold restart the computer, and I'm like, ha, got away with it, but I'm feeling like super guilty about like having done that, right? But I was like, that's okay, because I haven't upset my family. I haven't upset my parents. So I go about my normal teenage life. I don't know what I was doing. I was probably playing Age of Empires or playing Nintendo 64. And my dad fires up the computer, and that stupid printer, in the cache memory, it had kept the image file. So it starts printing out this picture, and my dad's sitting there on the computer, and he pulls it off. And so he's like, oh, look at this. And so I remember going into his bedroom with him, and he was like, hey, he was actually, this is actually right before he became my bishop. He calls me into, he asked me to come with him to his room. And I was like, all right, we're going to have a serious talk. And he was like, is this yours? And it's like, yeah, I got an issue. And he was like, yeah, it's okay. Do you want to talk to the bishop about it? And I said, yeah, that's a great idea.
Now, wait a second here. By the way, this is when you're 16, right, Adam?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Can you just briefly cover why it is that you have not talked to the bishop about it before? Because I'm sure that if you're 16 and growing up in the church, you've had more than one opportunity.
Oh, yeah. So if you go and you tell the bishop that you're doing this stuff, like, there goes your sacrament, there goes, if you're in the teacher's quorum, all the girls are going to be like, oh, look at him. He didn't take sacrament. He's not passing the sacrament. So you can't, it's super visible to everybody else. And I'm thinking the whole time, no one else has got this problem except me. Because, again, everybody at church is being perfect. I don't see them in their daily lives. So I'm thinking I'm the only person that has these struggles.
Right. So, by the way, has it ever occurred to you that your dad, when he saw what printed off of the printer, might have been extremely relieved that it wasn't his?
Well, so, I probably, knowing how much of a nerd that I am, and how geeky of a kid I was, he was probably like, attaboy, he is interested in the girls.
I was worried too.
Yeah, like he is interested in the girls. This isn't
how can homosexual members of the church? First, I want to change the question. There are no homosexual members of the church.
Yeah, so apparently.
The reason I love that quote is not only because Elder Bednar doesn't know what a homosexual member of the church is, he also doesn't know what a question is.
Yeah.
Right. Let me change that question. Let me change the question into a emphatic statement. He did a good job of changing that question, I'll tell you. Yeah. So you're to the point now. You got caught, yes, but it could be worse. You can deal with this as long as you minimize it only to the point where you're only guilty of what you got caught doing.
Yes, exactly. So
by the way, this is the entire philosophy behind the church's gospel topic essays. You admit to what you got caught doing and no more.
Yes, exactly.
So go ahead.
Exactly. Yeah. So I get caught. So I'm like, one-time deal. I'll go in to the bishop and I'll tell him, and I'll say, I was looking at it. I'm sorry. And so I go in with the bishop, and he was a really nice guy, family friend. And I sit down with him and counsel with him, and he was like, okay, so here's what I'm going to have you do. Since this was a one-off experience.
Pardon the pun.
Yeah, it wasn't a one-off experience. But he gives me a book, The Miracle of Forgiveness.
Yes, this is going to take care of everything.
Yes, exactly. And so
you're 16. It's now 1997?
No. It's probably about 2001.
Okay, so the Miracle of Forgiveness, still in circulation, still being used by bishops then, probably even today. Yeah. Because it's such a famous book, and it was around a long time. And this is supposed to cure what ails you when you've got problems of this nature.
Yeah.
Did you read it?
Oh, yeah. I read it multiple times. I read it probably over the course of between the ages of 16 and 18, I probably read it 7 or 8 times.
Holy cow.
It became part of my penance to read that book. And there were parts of that book where, of course, where Spencer W. Kimball says that masturbation leads to homosexuality. And so I'm like, shoot. Like, so here I am again dealing with this. I'm getting teased with it at school. It's always kind of been in the back of my mind, kind of a curiosity. Then I'll backtrack from this story. I got kind of carried away with the where I was with the pornography, and kind of go back a little bit to when I was 14,
right?
Because this will explain a little bit more of the bullying and homosexuality aspect. So this is right at the end of about 8th grade.
Gym class?
Yes, gym class.
Right.
So here's a trigger for sexual assault for anybody who needs to, take a 5-minute break or whatever. So there's a bunch of dudes in my gym class. High school gym class, and we have a locker room, so you go run a mile, go do some sports, and then after the sports you go to the gym locker room and change your clothes to go get ready for class again. And so these dudes have been making fun of me. Every member a missionary. I've always been really aggressive on telling people about the church and trying to be really kind, really friendly, which, in the early 2000s, late 90s, that's considered being gay, or at least in the community that I was living in. So they were teasing me again about being gay. And so one day they were teasing me pretty hard, going back into the locker room. We had just ran, and so I was pretty sweaty. Everybody was pretty sweaty, and I wasn't thinking straight. And this dude, he comes around from behind me, starts calling me the F word and accusing me of being gay. And so I turned around, and I had it. And I cock one up, and I'm not the biggest guy in the world, so I hit him with everything I got, which pushes him back into the lockers, and him and his buddies. It was game on for them, and so his buddies, he was like, I'm gonna teach you a lesson, F word. And so his buddies, they hold me down on the ground. And it's kind of ironic now that I think back about it, and from today and thinking about it. But he undresses his pants. He takes his pants off, and so he starts like doing the thing, and he rubs one off into his hand, and so he's got all of that ejaculate in his hand, and then he gets down over me, and he slaps me across the face a couple times, and he's like, "How do you like that? How do you like that?" And I was like, I was super traumatized. I like, no, this ain't gonna happen. So I sat there and I took it. They kicked me a couple times. Then the passing period bell rang, and so everybody cleared out. And I remember going to the sink, and I remember washing my face off in the sink. And I remember looking at myself in the mirror and saying to myself in my mind, this is what you get. This is what you deserve. Because you're dirty. You're separate from God. You're enigma. And this started a cycle and series of self-abuse. And so, you take that to getting the copy of the Miracle of Forgiveness, where it's talking about masturbation. It's talking about pornography. It's talking about lustful ideas. And I'm like, frick, I can't even keep a clean mind at church. I'm so screwed. I'm so screwed. I ruined my family. All this is on me. And so I doubled down. I said, I'm going to kick this shit. No pornography, no masturbation, not gonna have lustful thoughts. Because I'm going to find out that this is true. I'm going to find out that God loves me and that I've repented. I just need to do the work. I've always been a fan of history and studying world religions. I had friends who were Muslim when I was in middle school, and I was fascinated by their religion, fascinated by their practice. And I remember as a teenager being exposed in history class to the Spanish Inquisition and the plague, and how there was a group called the Flagellants. And the Flagellants, what they would do is they would go around in medieval Europe in the cities, and they would beat themselves with wooden boards, naked, marching in parades through the cities in order to appease the Lord and stave off the plague. Well, they were actually probably in reality they were a vector for the plague, because they were moving through all of Europe doing these processions. But I learned something from the Flagellants. If I could physically teach myself a lesson for what I was spiritually doing, if I could associate physical pain with spiritual pain, then I could kick this stuff, these habits, and then I could be pure, I could be true, I could be honest. So what I started doing is I would put tacks in my shoes on the days that I had dirty thoughts while I was at church. And I stopped my heel down into that tack when I had a dirty thought.
What is the significance of the dirty sock? Is that it's going to have to go into the laundry, so it doesn't make any difference if it gets blood on it?
Yeah. No, so not a dirty sock, a dirty thought.
Okay.
Yeah, the socks never really became too much of an issue for me. So where I would do it is I would do it right on the edge of my heel, so I would just feel it when I kick my shoe back. Not a lot of blood comes out of the heel, so it was pretty clean, but it taught myself the message. My other tool that I discovered was this one sucks. Icy hot. I put icy hot on my balls, and that fucking hurt. That really hurt, and it hurt for a long time. God dang.
Yeah, and icy hot, I recall from like being in track or sports or whatever, if you get some kind of an injury to usually to a muscle or something like that, you can put it on there. And it immediately, we had something called Kramer. I think we called it Kramer. It was probably actually pronounced Kramer. It came in these big tubs. It was like this orangey kind of viscous stuff you'd slap on things. But I can't imagine how much that would hurt applying it as you did.
Yeah,
because you can't just get it off, can you?
No. No. Sometimes
I would greasy, right?
Yeah, sometimes I try to wash it off, and the water
makes it
seems
worse.
to kind of just make it worse.
Yep, you're stuck once you go and put it on.
But I was gonna learn that lesson. So that's how I would do it, because I was gonna beat these dirty thoughts, because if I look at a girl and I lust after her, I'm committing a sin, a grievous sin, and I got prepared to go on a mission. I can't let my family down.
Can
So
I
I
back up for just a second,
gotta
Adam?
kill this thing.
Only because you still, okay, you had that one incident where you did get caught by your dad with the printer, and you did go to the bishop because you got caught, and you said something to the bishop, probably as little as possible to make it sound as de minimis as possible. He gives you miracle of forgiveness. After that, you continue to wrestle and struggle with this on your own, but did you ever try and involve another adult in this, like the bishop or your folks, or confessing it to anybody else?
No, I kept it all. I kept it all to myself.
And the reason, once again, is because of the shame inherent in confessing.
Yes, exactly. The shame inherent in confessing, and then also at the same time, just wishing that if I put enough time and distance away from it, if I could get that confirmation that I was forgiven, then if God didn't remember it, then I didn't have to remember it anymore. Because if God didn't remember it, then all of a sudden everything that I did, everything, it became justified through Jesus Christ and his atonement, because of that atonement. So like it would be gone. So I would give myself permission finally to let it go. But so the praying continued. The boy, I hated myself. I just really, wanted, I never thought about how I would kill myself or whatever. I never had suicidal ideations, but boy, I was cool if all of a sudden I got T-boned on the highway or something like that and taken out, because then I'd be like, sweet, now I don't have to worry about this anymore. The only reason why I worry about that was because I hadn't been forgiven, so I would be that broken link in my family chain. I would be that broken link. And that was unacceptable to me because I love my family more than anything in the world. So I committed to figuring it out and to getting right with the Lord. Because I'm the only person who's got this problem. And, they would mention in like priesthood, in priest quorum, you would have talks about pornography, and they'd be like, oh, there's lots of people who are doing it. And so we gotta address this, and we gotta make it stop. But no one in the room would be like, yeah, I've seen it or whatever. So you have that assumption that no one else is, but it's you. It's just you. And so I just shut up in color. And you go to the priesthood meetings, and they just kept talking about how you need to be worthy for those young ladies. So you'd be ready to take them to the temple and ready to have that eternal family, be a link in the chain with your family through all eternity. And I was like, sweet, I really want that. But I can't even stop having dirty feelings and thoughts about young women. Like, God's never going to trust me with one of his daughters. No way. And so I kept.
By the way, I'm so sorry to interrupt, because you had mentioned wanting to get enough time under your belt without these bad thoughts or without access to pornography, and that's what's going to do it for you.
Yeah.
Before you get there, were there any other steps that you took in order to punish yourself for what you were doing?
Oh yeah. So so I mentioned the tacks in my shoes. Oh yeah. Then there was also Fast Sunday. The idea of that we're taught that if you restrict yourself food, you'll become more spiritually open to receiving revelation. You skip 2 meals, you pay a fast offering, you get closer to God. And so my scrupulous mind was like, man, if I skip lots of meals, then I can get even closer to God. And so Fast Sundays became a real big thing. So I would fast on Fast Sunday, and then I would fast on other Sundays, and I started to develop. I think this is at the time where I developed my first eating disorder, but I wouldn't have classified it as that at the time. But I realized that I could use food and control of food as methodology for punishing myself, which will come up at a later date.
Right.
Can I jump in for just a minute?
Please.
I hope I can word this right. Mormonism is constantly telling us there's a lot of things to do, and there's so many things to do, you simply can't do them all. One. Two is that Mormonism tells you at every turn that if you don't do all the things, something's wrong with you, and you should be able to do all the things. And if you had the Holy Ghost, and if you were worthy, and if you repent, and if you do this, and if you do that, then you'll be clean and you'll be on the right track. And I remember I didn't have scrupulosity, like most people don't, right? And so when I heard all these things, and I joined the church as an older teenager, really almost a young adult, and I was sort of aware that these were older guys, and I took it seriously, but I also didn't take parts of it seriously. Like I recognize, like, you know, I look at porn once every 3 weeks or something. Like, all right, I'm not going to go tell anybody. Who cares? There's this idea in Mormonism that, you know, when you believe it, you really think everyone else is nailing it. You think you're the only person who's effed up and failing. There's so much to do, and it all feels like you're falling short because it's all pretend, right? It's all make-believe, and these guys make up all this stuff that has to be part of the plan. And then you take on top of it a young man who's got scrupulosity, and you end up, I don't know, you basically create a giant maze with no finish, and somebody just beating themselves up trying to figure out where the magic door is that solves the puzzle, and you can't. And yeah, I think these church leaders have got to recognize, certainly have to, that this isn't working, and it hurts bad enough for those of us who don't buy it completely. Like I just knew that every one of them was touching themselves. I grew up as a non-member, so I knew that masturbation was normal. I knew that, you know, every guy essentially was doing it, and most women were. And I just knew that if they said don't do it, I just knew it was nonsense. But when you grow up in the lens that isn't nonsense, I just can't imagine the damage that gets done to people. And when you make up a plan that is illogical and runs into dead ends at every turn.
Yeah. And the maze analogy is perfect analogy, because really there is no exit. Well, there's one exit.
Yeah.
There's one exit, and that's checking out.
But even that exit comes with penalties, right? Even you realize,
yes, exactly.
It gets you off the maze, but you don't end up anywhere better.
Yeah. And which leads me back to that idea that I had as a teenager is like, it would be really sweet if I just had a chronic heart attack in the middle of the night or got plowed over on the highway. And then it wasn't my fault. I didn't commit the sin of suicide, but then I'm not having to deal with this load that I'm carrying this whole time. So 16 to 18, I do pretty good. I'm going to church and doing all the right things, and I get close to going on the mission. And I think by the time I had started, yes. So this is a picture of me and my cousins right before I went to BYU, Idaho. So this is me as a 19/20-year-old. So I go to put in my mission papers, 18. I get my mission call to Quetzaltenango, Guatemala, and I'm super excited. Everyone's super excited. I had been 7 or 8 months sober from looking at pornography. And so I was feeling pretty good about it. I hadn't had that experience yet that I was waiting for that forgiveness. But I thought, the mission will do it. The mission will do it because I'll be 100% dedicated to the Lord all the time. There won't be any time to be messing around. Won't be any access to any computers. It's going to be perfect. This will dry me out for sure. And I'm like, yes, all right, let's do this. And I'm going to have that confirmation because, as the brethren were always teaching, it's kind of like Field of Dreams. If you bear your testimony, you'll get a testimony. The act of receiving a testimony is given through bearing a testimony. So, like, if you build it, they will come. So, like, if I go on a mission and testify that the church is true, then God will confirm to me that the church is true. So, I got no problem making that sales pitch. So, I'm going to go out on my mission. I'm going to do this. I get my mission call.
By the way, Adam, I'm not going to tell you the story now, but I'll let you know that there was a story regarding a certain playboy that made its way around the Mission District apartment in Mikunagaoka, Japan in the summer of 1981.
Oh my God.
I didn't pay any attention to it myself.
Of course not.
So I would have no way of knowing that Valerie Perrine was the centerfold in that area.
Oh man. See, people are going to people. People are going to people.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I go to the MTC and I'm feeling pretty good. Show up that first day. This is back in the day when your family, you went to go watch the movie about the drop off, and then, everybody was bawling, your family's crying. You're like, oh man, I'm becoming a man. I'm going on my mission. So
yes. Where were you raised, by the way? Am I detecting an accent coming through?
So I was raised all over the country, but
in the
Texas,
South anytime?
Yeah, so I was born in Texas, lived in Texas a couple times, stationed in Texas a couple times. So, whenever I get
identified the accent now.
Yeah, when I get excited, my Texan comes out. So I go out on the mission. I'm super stoked. First day, see my family off. I'm like, all right, this is going to be the experience. And surrounded by cool blokes. And then I go to, we're told that at like 7 or 8 o'clock, we're going to have interviews with the mission president. And I'm like, all right, here we go. Going to interview with the mission president and then off with a bang. And the mission president, everybody's lined up. He calls you in to sit down in the room with him one-on-one. I'm like, this is going to be a normal interview. I sit down with him. First question he asks is, do you or have you ever masturbated? And I wasn't going to tell him yes. I was 9 months clean. I was like, maybe God has forgiven me. So I'm going to tell the man no. And so I say no. I'm like, no, I never had a problem with that. And he's like, all right. Well, welcome to the MTC, blah, blah. And I am dying, RFM. I am dying. I feel so stinking guilty. Over the next 3 weeks, because I'm only in the MTC for 3 weeks before I get sent home early. Over the next 3 weeks, I end up losing about 30 pounds.
30 pounds in 3 weeks?
Yeah. Super stressed out, anxiety. Wasn't eating anything. I just felt awful. And my stomach was killing me. So kind of psychosomatic symptoms. I call it psychosomatic now, but at the time, I really thought my stomach had some serious issues going on with it. And so, they medically released me from my mission. And I remember flying home from the MTC, and I was like, frick, how am I gonna recover from this? But then I was like, I know what I'll do. I'll double down. I'll go to BYU, Idaho, and I will study this gospel, and I will get it good. And I will understand it better than my peers. because if I understand it better, then I will unlock that ability to get forgiven. And so I go home and I'm working for a semester. I get accepted to BYU, Idaho. I go out there and I've been clean from pornography and masturbation for since before I left for my mission. I was like, sweet, this is a good deal. I've got enough time and distance. So I enroll myself in the pre-seminary program, which is to become a full-time seminary or institute teacher.
You're going to become a seminary instructor.
Yeah. So I'm super committed. So roll back a little bit. Over my entire youth, I kept thinking, if I could, because you remember the story about the flagellants and stuff like that? I was obsessed with Roman Catholic priests because there were, again, I didn't know anything about the child abuse. Here's all I saw was these men who were dedicated to living God's way. And I was like, man, LDS church, the true church, doesn't have paid clergy, but they got seminary and institute teachers. So how can I focus my life to God without being a missionary? Because I can't be a missionary because I masturbated, but I could probably be a seminary teacher. So I get into the pre-seminary program. I'm studying to be a seminary teacher. I take Hebrew and I take Latin. I read the Old Testament. I read the Torah and the Talmud in Hebrew. Read the New Testament in Latin as part of the course. Getting super excited. College is going well. Then my sophomore year, college comes in, and you know how at BYU Idaho you have to live in approved housing, and you get 6 dudes in each apartment, 6 females in their own apartment, but it's all cordoned off by apartment buildings. So you're not in the same buildings or anything at BYU Idaho. And so I'm sitting there and I'm assigned to my roommates, and I'm like, all right, sweet. Freshman year, had awesome roommates. Everything's good. Sophomore year, I get this new roommate, and he's in my room with me. And one night I just roll over and he's on his computer at like 2 a.m. looking at porn. And your boy, like, I just fell right off that horse. I just fell right off that horse because I saw it on his screen and I couldn't get that image out of my mind. I was fixated on it because it's like, you know, that psychological principle. If you got kids and you tell your kids, you can't play Xbox, you know, what are they going to do? They're going to want to play Xbox all the time. And if they go over to a friend's house who has Xbox, you can't pull them off of it. They turn into little heathens. It's like same thing if you restrict sugar or candy from children. Same thing for me. I had gone so long without pornography that when I saw that picture, I completely fell off the horse. I couldn't get that image out of my mind.
Adam, so that you know, we're going to try and wrap up your story in the next 20 minutes. Just It's 6:25 now, my time, 7:25 for Utah time. And we'll see if we can wrap this up and allow time for some people to call in as well.
Oh, yeah, sure. So I'll give you the speed version. So end up getting kicked out of the seminary, the pre-seminary program, because your boy is single, and single men can't be trusted in the church with positions of serious leadership or stewardship over the youth. So I'm trying to be a seminary teacher. By the time it becomes time for me to get a class assigned for my internship, they have to remove me from the program because I'm not married and I can't teach in seminary. So I'm just a history major.
And that had not come to anybody's attention before you graduated?
No.
That would be a problem?
I think they just assumed that everybody knew you had to be married.
You were already assigned, weren't you?
So that's when I got ID'd, is when they were making the assignments. Yeah. Yep. So, you know, I had a history degree. I graduate. And then I decided to go back out on my mission.
Now, this is remarkable too, because this is some time after your first attempt.
So I'm 24 when I go back out on my mission. Because, glutton for punishment. So I put in an application to go back out, Spanish speaking to San Francisco, super excited.
Right.
This time.
And what year was this, Adam?
This was 2008.
And what was going on in San Francisco in 2008?
Proposition 8. Proposition 8.
There's a lot of inspiration in that call.
Yes. Oh, so much. And so I go out there, and I'm only out there for like 2 or 3 months. I go out, and by the time December, the vote had already happened. And so there was a lot of retribution towards
By the way,
missionaries.
Adam, thumbnail sketch, Prop 8, what's the retribution look like, and what's going on as far as your view on the ground there?
Oh, yeah. So I got spit on a couple times, chased off with a bat off of a bus. People, sometimes they say San Francisco is the most closed-minded, open-minded place in the country. I don't blame them for their reaction at the time, because, I didn't think I was doing something that was bad. I thought I was doing the Lord's work. Now I understand that, what the church was doing, what they were spending the tithing money on was completely antithetical to the teachings of Christ, because Christ has never mentioned homosexuality once. It's just been the old tired men with beards who have. So I end up going out on my mission, and in December, they're reorganizing the California missions, and my mission president calls me into his office, says, I'm 24 at the time. Mission president says, hey, they're closing down the mission, and I feel impressed that I don't have an idea of which mission to send you. So I feel impressed to tell you that the Lord wants you to go home and complete your last semester at BYU, Idaho, get out, date, get married, have a family. You're at the right age. And so it's like, all right. And so that's a picture of me from my second mission there as a 24-year-old. So I go home. I go back to BYU, Idaho. I finish my history degree. The next year, this is right around 2009, 2010, when the economy tanked. The Great Recession kicked off. No one was hiring. So I volunteered for this national service organization down to a tech college associated with Weber State University. And while I was down there, so I was making $600 a month, living in a studio apartment right next to the Ogden Temple. And while I'm there, I'm like, all right, I got to get right with the Lord. So I'm going to the temple 2, 3, 4 times a week, working at the temple, getting all that done, and just trying to make amends for the terrible, awful life that I had lived as a youth. So I wouldn't be a break in the chain with my family. Eventually, it was like, at this time, it was 2012. I was looking for a change. I wasn't making any money. I was still single. And so I called my dad and I asked my dad, I was like, hey, I was thinking about joining the military. My dad retired from the Navy. And he said, that's great. Whatever you do, don't join the Navy. I said, okay, sweet. So I called my older brother and I said, hey, man, think about joining the military. And he's like, oh, that's great. My older brother's in the Army. And he's like, whatever you do, don't join the Army. And so I was like, well, shoot, I'm sure as heck not going to join the Marine Corps because, I'm not that big. So I was like, I'm going to join the Air Force. So I joined the Air Force, and best decision I ever made in my life. Because up until this point, the only people I ever really associated with were members of the church, because I felt in my mind, based off of what I had been taught, because I took it seriously, that I couldn't trust non-members, because non-members were led by the deceiver. So I had never really been exposed to a whole lot of people who believed things different than me, of my own choosing. I collated my own friends. Like, I had associates at school, never hung out with non-members, never, because, I was already ruined my own life. I wasn't going to let non-members, ruin it even further for me. So when I joined the Air Force, all I was exposed to were people from a vastly diverse spectrum of belief and background, socioeconomic status. And it hit me probably about 2 years. It started to hit me even as soon as basic training. But I realized, wait a minute, these people aren't evil. Not only are they not evil, but they're motivated to do good. But what motivates them to do good if it's not the gospel of Jesus Christ as taught by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? And so I asked them about their own belief processes and stuff. And I learned further that, Muslims, that Catholics, that evangelical Christians all sincerely have faith in their convictions, and convictions in their faith that lead them to believe that what they believe is true. And they can say things like, well, I know what I believe is true. If you go over to Saudi Arabia, everybody on the street over there is like, oh yeah, Allah is great, Allah is wise, Allah is miserable, not miserable. Freudian slip, yeah. But
merciful.
Merciful, yeah,
okay.
Merciful. And so I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, wait a minute, all these people think like me about my religion, but they think the same thing about their religion, and they're sincere about it. And so then I started thinking, what if I don't have a monopoly on the truth? And so now I'm in my now I'm in my 30s. And I've met so many wonderful people, made so many friends, and I'm starting to lit up a little bit, but I'm still towing the line. And I start to think, okay, maybe I can accept nuance. Maybe I can accept that the Book of Mormon is literal without having to know where it occurred. And I started introducing nuance into my life, and it's slowly letting it creep in. And meanwhile, I'm doing the things I'm supposed to be doing. I'm serving in the singles ward bishopric, later in a family ward bishopric as the executive secretary, because single people can't be counselors. You have to be an example of living the gospel, and to live the gospel, you have to be married in the temple with children. So I'm only halfway living that as a single person. But
by the way, Adam, was there stuff you were learning in your history classes in college that was also informing your questions of the church and its narrative?
Yes, exactly. So the stuff that I'm learning back then in college, and then also in my self-study, is realizing that even the church's doctrine and its view and its perspective of its own past has slowly and subtly changed. And I just accepted that change as being, oh, well, new light, new revelation. We're slowly refining the good ship Zion. And that's how I interpreted it. And that's how I kind of encouraged apologetics on myself, enforced apologetics on myself. So I allowed more space for these nuances, like when that church came out with the Ensign article with the seer stone. That was infuriating to me, because I remember firmly believing as a child, walking all through the aisles of the churches and seeing pictures of Joseph Smith with the golden plates, looking down at them, and the scribe on the other side of the veil literally writing out what he's got. And then all of a sudden, and I remember telling people at school who were telling me, they were like, hey, that Joe Smith, he used a stone and a rock and a hat. What kind of prophet is that? And I was like, you're a liar. He did not use a stone and a hat. Joseph Smith's a prophet of God, and God translated that word to him from the plates directly, and there's no mistakes in that book at all. And then I find out through studying for pre-seminary and through the church magazine, oh yeah, there was a rock and a hat. Well, okay. Like, why did the narrative change? I can't handle this as someone with scrupulosity. And then, so the Air Force is moving me around, speed up my story a little bit more. I get transferred to Maryland, and then COVID happens and the shutdown, and the brand new book series, The Saints, comes out, or at least it was new to me. Mm-hmm. And I bought the first book and the second book, and I'm reading them, and the church made the largest strategic error I think they've ever made when teaching their own history, because they put footnotes to the church essays on the websites. And I don't think they were expecting members to go look at those footnotes. Because if you follow the footnotes onto the essays, where they give you a little bit more story, a little bit more background about the seer stone, about the treasure digging, I couldn't pick my jaw up off the floor, because everything that they had told me, everything that I had learned through the correlated materials was different. And it was my fault for not knowing the truth, because the truth was always on those essays. Apparently I didn't have the faith. So they're gaslighting me.
And it sounds like up to a certain point, you're accepting the gaslighting, and even going along with it to gaslight yourself, right? Oh yeah. I took the gas lamp off of the post, and I put my mouth around that thing, and I was drinking all of the natural gas. I was sucking that, because I was like, man, I'm firmly committed to this. I want my family to be together for eternity. So by God, this is the truth. Absolutely, 110%. And then to have the essays sit there and say, oh, well, we just don't know. Just don't know became the official euphemism for we made it up, or that's not actually what happened. And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, well, okay. So all of a sudden, my shelf broke, and I was like, I had enough time. I didn't have a calling anymore. I was sitting at home. Adam, can I ask you something? Because you have moved to Maryland now, right?
Yes.
Do you remember the point at which you realized that it wasn't your fault, and you're not the one who had misinformed yourself about the method of translation, and actually you were the one being gaslighted by church leaders? Yes.
So when I first started distancing myself from the church, I'd listened to a podcast. The first one that I ever listened to was a group called Mythical Morning with Rhett and Link, their show called Ear Biscuits, where they deconstruct their evangelical faith, which gave me a mind that it was okay for me to look at things outside. And so the first suggestion that Spotify gave me for when I typed in Mormon was Radio Free Mormon. And so I was like, all right, I'll listen to what this dude's got to say. And I appreciate what RFM did, because he put what the church says and the reality that they later copped to, or how it had changed, side by side. Right at this time when I had left, it was right during General Conference. And that's where RFM, or not RFM, but Russell M. Nelson said that what happened in the Book of Mormon literally occurred. And that's where I realized that there was no room for me as a nuanced member to be in the church anymore. And I resigned my membership almost to the day that RFM released the episode called Shame Game. Because that's when I realized, while at the same time I was working through it with therapists that were assigned from the Air Force, helping process with my sexual assault and everything that had happened in the past, all the shame and guilt that I had felt. And that's when I realized, even if it is all true, even if God does turn out to be Mormon Jesus Christ, like, I don't know if I want to live with that guy for eternity. Because what kind of God leads his children into, like what Bill said, a maze with no exit, or where the exit's always shifting and changing?
Can I just add too, when you doing a search for Radio Mormon and finding RFM, by the way, I think is the real reason there's a revelation that's to Elder Nelson, President Nelson, that says that using the word Mormon is a victory for Satan. They are trying to disconnect from that word, because if you put in Church of Jesus Christ of, and then latter, of course, we'll catch Mormon stuff, but day and saints, those terms aren't going to be as effective. It really is the word Mormon. And so the church knows to get itself away from those search results, it has to make Mormon be a word that is just leaves a very bad taste in our mouth.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. So true. And here's where I'm at today. When people ask me if I have a church, I tell them that I belong to the church of I don't know, and that's okay. It's okay to not know. Because at the end of the day, it's a Pascalian wager, essentially. I bank my money on living today and now, and being grateful for what I have, the experiences that I've had, the good and the bad, that helped me become the individual that I am today. For the time and for the family that I have, and to focus on those experiences with them, to share my love with them. And I would rather focus on that and live a good life and a happy life today, and die and find out that there's nothing afterwards, having lived my life to the fullest, than to live in a constant struggle to appease a God that won't even prove to us that he's real, at least not in a substantial way that, can prove to two people on different sides of the world that, oh yeah, this is the guy. So, if it matters, and I show up and it is Mormon Jesus, then I'll be like, yeah, well, thanks for doing such a great job of making yourself known and how important it was to be a member to all 8.5 billion of us on the planet. Is that the kind of person I want to spend all eternity with? And ultimately, at the end of the day, the further I get away from it, the more I realize the perspective that I've come to the conclusion is that, my faith has led me to ultimately this conclusion where I have no idea what's next. And I have to be okay with that. I'm open to there being something, but you know, all the stuff that I did in the past, if that wasn't good enough, then what more is there to give? And I just I don't understand. I don't understand the cost.
Right. Adam, we're going to have some phone calls, I trust, here shortly. But before we do that, I want to make sure that your story is completed, because I know that what you're saying resonates with a lot of people going through a similar thing, even now, or maybe have in the past, or know somebody else who is, and not sure how to help them. And the one thing I wanted to make sure that you mentioned was
yes.
your connection. Finally, you decided to start seeing a therapist.
Yes. Thank you for reminding me of that. So I started working with a therapist in 2016 because...
And this was because your bishop recommended you see a therapist, right?
No.
It's because your stake president recommended you see a therapist, right?
No, not at all. It was because a dear friend saw that I was struggling. And she cared enough to say, hey, maybe you should go talk to someone about this. And I said, oh, well, you know, I've seen the bishop about it. And she's like, no, maybe you should go see a therapist.
Somebody other than the bishop for a change.
Yeah.
After 25 years.
Yeah. And it made all the difference in the world. And that's where my journey with therapy began. In the Air Force, everybody's experience with the military is different, of course. But my unit was so supportive. I had been on the night shift for like 5 years straight. I had gone from 160 pounds to like 97 pounds. I had developed a full-on eating disorder because of the night shift and because of how obsessive I was at studying the gospel and trying to understand.
Oh, he got a picture of
who
you
I
up here.
was. Oh yeah, so that's me at about 97 pounds.
Oh my Lord!
Wow.
Yeah.
Damn.
And this is where my friend saw me, and she loved me enough to say something.
And you're going to church, or is this during church, or is this when church is closed down?
So this is during church.
And
this is
nobody's making a similar comment to what your friend did about maybe you should see a professional?
So they were making comments, but they told me I looked like I had lupus or that I was a cancer victim. One person said that I was on the Holocaust diet. So
all of these are obviously not funny, even by my standards, and that's saying something. But nobody actually just says, hey, Adam, maybe you should see a professional for some help.
No, not until I promised her I wouldn't say her name. I think she's watching tonight. But seriously, she saved my life. Yeah. She really did. I mean, if you would go to picture 13 and for a little bit, there's me as a temple worker in Alaska. There's me in Alaska again. There's me and my parents while they were on their mission. This is me and my older brother at the Philadelphia temple when I was in my 30s. Maven, if you don't mind going to picture 13. There's me when I stopped wearing garments. I put that on the ex-Mormon Facebook and got a big kick out of that. Everybody's like, "Ooh, nice legs." I'm like, "Sweet, thanks."
For a second, I was thinking, should I be looking at this?
Yeah, that's my dirty ungarment covered legs right there. I was 36 years old, super excited about that.
And then it looks like there's something floating in the fire.
Yes, that's a hot dog. Yeah.
Okay.
You sinner, Richard.
Oh yeah.
Even now, your hot dog's in the fire.
Oh, yeah. Oh my gosh.
I don't even know what that means.
Well, we'll let the listeners draw their conclusions, especially the ones that are listening to the podcast and not seeing the picture.
But you got your
And
garments
then-
off. You took a picture to commemorate it.
Yes, exactly.
When was this?
Exactly. So this was 2021, the spring of 2021. Yeah.
So you were one of the.
Sorry, I don't know what
here's
picture 13 is.
Oh,
that you're
it's
wanting.
it's labeled moving to Monterey. It's me in the blue vest. There we go. So that's
There we
me.
go. Okay.
That's me when I moved back out here to my current assignment. And then the last picture is labeled on the other side. And this was just a couple weeks ago with my sister and her family. Back at a healthy weight. I guess the whole point of my whole story, RFM and Bill, and I really appreciate you having me on, is that, you know, like the thing that upsets me about the Brethren is not that they have their own church and their own doctrine and their own gospel, because lots of religions have that. But the thing that I have a hard time with, especially with organized religion and especially ours, is that they don't know, or maybe some of them do. I think maybe the Quorum of the 12 and the First Presidency do, but that people take them seriously, deadly seriously. And at some point, I just wish any one of those priesthood leaders, you know, would have just been like, hey, you don't need a spiritual solution. You need a real, tangible solution in the here and now. You know, the best that we can offer you is like improvement in the next life. But when you're a kid who spent 25 years of your life convinced that you're going to hell, like, yeah, nothing that they could offer me would have been a solution.
You were
So
already in hell, weren't you, Adam?
I was and covered in icy hot.
Oh my gosh. Well,
Yeah.
I tell you what, Maven, I'm surprising you by just announcing you and asking, oh, you're there behind Joan Galloway. I see you now. Oh no, that's Bill. That's Bill behind Joan Galloway on the screen. I want to ask Maven on to see what she has to add in her thoughts. And then maybe we can go to phone calls.
So I don't have a lot of thoughts actually to add, other than just I had a friend that really struggled with this, that I watched, have to go through some of these compulsive thoughts and just regarding several different things. And it is so much better on the other side, but can be really, really difficult for a person with scrupulosity to even get to this point of even thinking, imagining that the church might not be true. So it's quite the journey just to even be able to get out of the church. And my friend is now out. It's something that I've been watching and hoping for many years, but once it doesn't always go away necessarily, especially if there is, because there is a mental health component to it. Sometimes there's some, brain, what is it? You know what I mean? That the structure can still be there. And sometimes, I think we've talked about this before, sometimes if someone has a predisposition to certain conditions, the religion can really kick things into high gear or trigger it to start where maybe in a healthy environment it might never have. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out, I guess, for people. It's not necessarily a cure. For some people, it can be getting out of the church or getting out of whatever restrictive religion that you're in. But sometimes there's still mental health care that needs to be done. But the majority of people I know who have come out on this side, who have had extreme scrupulosity, are doing much better, even with sometimes there's that fear of hell or fear that I made a mistake. So anyway, that's all that I have.
Yeah,
Thank you, Maven.
I appreciate that. Maven is so true. I don't know if I could ever trust myself to seriously investigate going into another religion, because I think I would probably need to prove that one as well. So for me, I just have to rest on my hope that if there is a God, he'll be compassionate enough to see the struggle that I've had and the effort that I've made to get to know them, and hope that that's enough.
Hey, Adam,
Because
your
I,
friend in Alaska isn't named Amy, is she?
yeah, yep,
Wild guess.
there she is. Oh my God, Amy, thank you so much. She really did save my life.
For
Really did
those of you
save
who
my
are
life.
listening and not able to see this, Amy with last name Otte. How do you pronounce that correctly, Adam?
Adi.
Otte.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not even going to go there. But Amy Otte says, "Damn right, your friend from Alaska is watching right now."
Yeah, you weren't doxing her, RFM. She put herself up on the screen, so she put herself
Yeah,
in the
exactly.
comments. So.
She opened that door right there.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
I agree,
totally
by the
my
way.
hero.
I agree, by the way, Adam. I hold the position, I don't know what it is, talking about whatever's out there in the universe. I don't know what it is, but I sure as hell know what it's not. And it sure as hell isn't Mormonism.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we have some calls. We do have some questions from the chat.
To be honest, we had a couple of calls come in, Maven, and they hung up. So we don't have calls. So maybe a couple of questions in the chat will be the way we could do it.
Oh, it's all good. So we have someone asking what position you came in the family, if you were the oldest or youngest.
Middle child. Middle child.
Okay.
Yep.
And then we've got a lot of well-wishing. Also, I'll put them up here. There was someone who's wanting to know how your family has reacted to your resignation or coming out of it on this side. How's your family done with that?
So I am so fortunate and so lucky because they've all been incredibly supportive. When I told them a lot of my trauma and my background and what I've struggled with, and then kind of talk to them about scrupulosity, they're very respectful. And so I've always tried to be and share the road with them too, because they're all active and practicing. I've gone back a couple times to church with them, and I just kind of sit there quietly and I think about the journey that my life has taken me on. And if it works for someone, it works for them. What I have an issue with is when they start projecting their authority to make decisions for people who don't accept those values and those morals, or don't share those values and morals. And then also when they change the field goal, because believe it or not, I'm going to make a declaration right now. In 20 years, I bet you gay marriage is going to be totally legal in the church, and they're all going to be like, yeah, we've supported it forever. Yeah. And like everybody's going to gaslight themselves and be gaslight by the organization that, this has always been God's will. It was just, old stubborn men back in the 2020s who weren't with the word of God. It was just the doctrine of men and not the doctrine of God. But now we have the doctrine of God, God's true will and knowledge. So it will be our fault again, but at least they'll have made the progress in the future when it,
It's always our fault.
Yep.
But at least progress, like you say, at least progress gets made.
Yeah.
And I can't help noticing the fact that it was no priesthood leader who directed you to therapy, which helped. It was a non-member, non-priesthood holding woman. Oh,
so she was actually a member at the time, but we're both doing our own things. Yeah, I think I think if you pull that string of doubt, you know, it will continue to unravel. And if we're honest with ourselves, we really can't, based off of I told you so's of multi-generations of prophets, it's not right to make entire life decisions based off of, oh, well, after you die, you'll find out. Well, then it does nobody any good. And, you know, it's like being sold a car that isn't on the lot and that they don't have to give you. Like, I don't know, that's probably a flawed analogy, but I can't think of anything better at the time. They don't have to prove anything. And when you ask them to prove it, they make you feel guilty for asking.
Absolutely, because you're a lazy learner. By the way,
yeah.
I'm hearing reports that there are calls and lines are jammed. Is this true?
I've got one call on. Somebody else just hung up again. So, but I do have a call here if you want to take it.
Yeah,
there was
please.
someone who said they're not hearing the audio of the show, which they're
sometimes
they're
that plays.
so.
It sounds like he might have been in the queue, and for whatever reason, it playing the show while they're on hold didn't work that time or something. But we do have one here. This is actually, I don't have a name. So, caller, are you there? Oh, give me 1 second. Oh.
Morning.
There we go. What's 1 second. What's the name?
Peter.
I didn't hear that. Sorry.
Peter.
Theta.
Peter.
Go ahead, my friend.
Hello, Bill. Can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Excellent. One for you, Adam. Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay. One for you, Adam. With your chain in command, were they entirely supportive, obviously, with what you've been going through, or just curious? I'm like you. I did 30 years, retired as a warrant officer, or E8, so to speak. So it's interesting to hear your spin, because what you went through, it's just something that we never see down here in Australia, especially in the Australian Army. That's all I have. Back over to you. Peter, out.
Okay. Thank you, Peter.
I think that was Peter Higgs, who's active in our chat, because I believe that Peter is also from Australia. So I'm assuming it's the same person. Thanks for calling in.
That's cool. We get calls from all over the country, don't we? All over the world.
The Australian Army, is that the one where there were the hats with one brim down and one brim up on the side?
Yeah, but I think that's only for their female officers.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not certain. I've only seen a few Australian service members at one of my duty stations in the past. But it's always good to see a warrant in here. Yes, this has not always been the way that the United States military is, but it's moving in this direction, and it's a very welcome move. That the number one focus is on making sure that service members are fit for the fight. And so, at least in the chain of command that I had, where I was in Alaska at the time, 110% supportive all the way. And if anything could be called a blessing, it was that I had the leadership chain that I did.
Well, good. By the way, there was something very important that Peter Higgs had put up and was on the screen until a second ago. If we can get that comment back up. Thank you, Peter. It's always an important comment when it says I'm right. He says, no, it is not. It's for all ranks. And I assume he's talking about the hat and the brim up and the brim down. You see, this is what you get
must be.
for watching Doctrine every Saturday on reruns as a kid. And you get to know the Australian guys and the different kind of hats they wear.
I'm going to have to go to a joint service professional military education course. TDY down to Australia? Yes, please.
I thought they also did this funny marching thing where they only move one arm and the other one remains stationary. Like their left one remains stationary and they pump their right arm. You know, that's how we marched around and pretended we were with the Australian Army.
Very well could be. I'm just glad they're on the same team with us.
Absolutely.
One more call if you guys want it.
Please.
All right. So this is Walt. Walt, you're going to be our final caller for the night. Go ahead, my friend.
Hi. Thanks, everyone. Good to listen to your story tonight. I really appreciated hearing it, Adam. I'm just curious, maybe kind of two combined questions. What, Adam, do you feel was the thing that, a therapist kind of identified as what differentiated scrupulosity from just the normal grind of feeling like you have to be a good Mormon? And as a follow-up, what helpful tools have you found in kind of combating that through therapy and other practices in your current life?
Well, thank you for the question, for both questions. The first answer is what raised the flag for my therapist on scrupulosity was after I described my sexual assault and talking about how I had started to physically hurt myself as a form of recompense for spiritual transgression. And then also spending 4, 5, 6, 7 hours a night praying after I had gone through a session where I had looked at pornography or something like that. I would literally spend 6 hours begging for forgiveness, just to hear God's voice. Wet tears, wet pillow, all of that. It inhibited my ability to live my life and to function. The second question, I forgot what the second question was.
He's still there. We can.
Yeah.
What's the second question?
Yeah, thanks. The second question is, what helpful practices you have seen, or what practices you have seen helpful in your current, more hopefully doing better on the scrupulosity side.
Excellent. Thank you for reminding me of the question. Journaling. I kid you not, journaling, so helpful. I have years full of journals back here on my bookshelf, and going back and reading journal entries, going back and reading through, and all I would do is I would write what I didn't like during that day, what I struggled with, what I did to overcome that, what I did like about that day. My journal entries initially started out very, very robotic, and the list of dislikes were mostly about myself. The list of likes were like Pop-Tarts taste good, chocolate milk is awesome, The Goonies, best movie ever. And sorry, RFM. And to being describing what I was struggling with that day and how I overcame it. So if I was in a rut where say I have a day like today or another day in the future where I think, man, I've broken that link in the chain. I can look back to my journal entries of how I've processed that before, and externalizing that, those thoughts, externalizing those beliefs helps you to see them from a perspective, a third person perspective, outside of yourself. And if you can get outside of yourself to understand your current problem, your current situation, it helps you contextualize, and then also look for a resource for how you can deal with it again, because you do stumble over and over and over again. But each time it becomes a little bit easier to dust your knees off and keep moving forward.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. This is something that we can do as well. It's not something I was specifically taught to do with my friend, but I guess ended up kind of sort of learning about it. So when we would have conversations, I started to, as we became better friends, I started to clue in to when they were dealing with the scrupulosity, because they would say something they were worried about, just like anyone would in a normal conversation, but it would kind of cycle back and keep coming back to that. So sometimes it maybe took me a couple times for me to realize what was happening. But instead of just being like, oh no, you're fine, don't worry about that, I did start asking, so what does that mean? And then what? And then what? Because the more, when it is inside your head, you can get to be pretty ridiculous but really believe it. And so, yeah, my friend said that this was something that helped them, that saying it out loud. Just to give an example, one was they were writing a paper for a college essay. And of course, in school, it's extremely important to cite things correctly. Otherwise, it's plagiarism. And so, and dishonesty, right? And so this is what they were, because of some confusion or some worry over the correct citation format. It was something that kind of triggered their honesty, like scrupulosity. And so, we just kind of talked it out, So what happens if you do it wrong? Well, then I've plagiarized and I've stolen this person's work, and I'm claiming it as my own, and then I get kicked out of school for plagiarism, and I can't get into any other school because it looks so bad, plagiarism, and then I can't get this career, and my whole life is over. But when you say it out loud and you realize, like, citations are something that not everybody else gets perfectly either, especially when there's different styles out there. There's reasons why there's entire books about it. So you can look up exactly what needs to be underlined and exactly where a period goes versus a colon or a semicolon, So, but that was something that did help them as well, because then I don't know, we would go all the way through this part where, like, your life is over, it's ruined, you might as well, just give up now, and then just kind of like relax and be like, that's silly.
Yeah.
If I legitimately try, and they can see that I'm trying to cite this correctly, even if I make a mistake, it's unlikely that the school will kick me out for it. And so that was something that helped. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I don't know how many times it was like loosey goose and the sky is falling for everything, all the small things. I said a bad word, I'm going to hell. You jump straight to the worst case scenario every time, and externalizing it with a trusted friend like Maven in your scenario, absolutely key, because if you can hear yourself say it, then you can be like, wait a minute, has that ever happened in the past? Nah, it's probably not going to happen for me in this circumstance either.
Very good. Very good. Hey, Bill, do you have anything else you want to add? I know you've been doing a lot of work there behind the scenes with comments and everything.
No, Maven was doing that. Maven was here the whole show, and she was taking care of the slideshow.
What the hell have you been
wasn't
doing?
Needed, and she was putting the comments up.
What have you been doing there?
He's been commenting.
All I did was find an image that I threw up there towards the end with the things that you have to kind of unravel inside once you're deconstructing religion. But otherwise, I'm all good. I want to just say, you sound like a great guy, and you take the religious pressure to be something that's impossible out of it. And this probably would have been half as, it still would have been difficult because you did have scrupulosity. But it would have been probably half the battle it was. And so I just want to say I really appreciate your vulnerability. You shared a lot of things tonight that I think are awkward to share, but it tells the story of how all this works.
Yeah, I appreciate you. Thank you, Bill.
Yeah.
And I'm going to throw
a lot of comments.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. I was saying a lot of comments are really appreciating, especially some of the really difficult things you explained beforehand. Really appreciating your vulnerability and your willingness to talk about this, because you're not the only one. This really helps people who are not at this point yet. So, and for people like me that didn't put tacks in our shoes, it's helpful to see this experience and learn from it. So
Totally.
So on behalf of everyone in the chat, I just also want to thank you for your courage to do that.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for coming on. Thanks for being brave enough. And I hope this was as therapeutic and as cathartic as you were hoping it would be.
Absolutely. Very good experience. Thank you for taking the chance and letting a random old salty tech sergeant jump on your channel and tell his life story.
and just in honor, if you're ready to go, RFM, I've got a little thing here. We'll just.
I want to say thank you for your service,
goodie.
Adam, but then turn it over to you for the last word, Bill.
Yeah, go
Thanks
ahead.
for your support.
Yeah. I'll just note this is an oldie but a goodie, but in honor of the things that are normal that Mormonism makes awkward.
Mormonism Live. Better than touching your own little factory.